Dr. Michael Shank, he's a Director of Engagement for the Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance and Adjunct Professor of Sustainable Development at NYU. Great to have you on the program,
It's great
Dr.
to be here,
Shank.
Sally.
Yeah. Firstly, we've got the wildfires in Texas and the blizzards in California and Sierra Nevada. How normal is it to see these kinds of polar opposite extreme weather events at this time of year and in these locations?
Yeah, with climate change, we're going to see more fires, more floods, and more ferocious storms like these. You know, people will say colloquially on the street in conversation, oh, I remember a storm like this 50 years ago or 60 years ago. These once in 100-year storms, these once in 1,000-year storms and fires and floods will become once in 10 years, once in 5 years because of climate change. The warmer the air, the more precipitation it holds, the heavier the dumps, the more flooding we see. California saw that weeks ago, and now with these storms, these more ferocious storms, we'll see that as well with climate change. So this extreme weather will definitely become more common, and so we have to prepare in advance, make our cities and communities more resilient, and adapt accordingly.
So if we're talking about the future here, what is part of the challenge in trying to set climate change goals and planning? I mean, many advocates are concerned that features of democracy risk hobbling climate action. We know that Trump promised to tear up Biden's administration's signature Inflation Reduction Act if he wins in November. And while Europe, populist parties are vowing to limit the EU's Green Deal should they gain power in June. Does climate change have a democracy problem, do you think?
Well, my concern is that if a party goes down, let's say the US, if the Democratic Party loses in November and the Democrats lose the White House, so too is climate action and climate policy lost to some extent. That's a problem. We actually need to separate climate action and climate policy from a party, make it apolitical, non-political. And I've got a long history of co-authoring with members of Congress from the Republican Party and the Democratic Party because both parties ultimately want cleaner air and cleaner water and a better living environment to live in. They want cooler cities. They don't like urban heat islands as much as anyone. And so to the extent that we can separate climate action and climate policy from a particular party, the more long-lasting it is, the more sustainable the policy. And so I see folks in the administration, the Biden administration, thinking about how to make this policy stick, like environmental justice work, for example, so that if Trump comes in November, the policy sticks around, even if it's by another name, because one party may not like the words environmental justice, but another party might. So to the extent that we can separate them from parties and really appeal to people's best interest in terms of how life is better, how the air is cleaner, how the cities are cooler, how the water is more enjoyable to swim in, how the energy bills are cheaper, if we can appeal on those fronts, the people-centric approach, the more long-lasting the policy is going to be.
But it involves a lot of change, doesn't it? I mean, when we talk about politics, it seems, and correct me if I'm wrong, that not a lot of people disagree that climate change is a thing now, which 20 years ago it still seemed like a conversation to be had. Yeah. But when it comes to actually putting policy in place, change is the challenge, and money speaks louder than, whether the air is clean or not. Is that right?
Well, if we're going to speak to money, thankfully, renewable energy beats fossil fuels globally. So now it's cheaper to operate an EV, for example, electric vehicle. It's cheaper to have a heat pump in your home, for example. And with all these brownouts and blackouts that you were talking about earlier in the segment, if I've got solar panels on my roof and battery storage in my garage and an EV and a heat pump, not only am I saving money, so to the money cost competitiveness of renewable energy, but also, my grid isn't going down. I've got power and I can continue to generate power in and amidst a brownout or a blackout that might have taken down the grid. So from an energy security perspective and from a cost competitiveness perspective, we're there. Now, unfortunately, again, climate action, climate policy is attached to a party, and so if the party is defeated, so too goes the climate action, climate policy versus, again, appealing to the public with how is life better, how is the air cleaner, how are your energy bills lower, with all of these transition opportunities afforded to you.
All right, Dr. Michael Shank, always appreciate your insight.
Thanks, Sally. It's good to be here.